Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to the June 26th office hours for requirements management. There's a few items on the agenda. I think the first one's from Jan. I don't know if you'd like to voice over that.
Can't hear you.
They have audio.
Wrong mic.
If you don't mind, Jan, I'll read your comment and try to respond as best I can here. Jan's comment was, now that we have a basic traceability of requirements from CI, what do we think should be the next steps or improvements? And then is there anything engineering can do to help with now? I did post a link here, and I'll post it in the YouTube as well because it's a public link to our Epic. Our user researcher, Nick, has gone and he did a really great job of doing a user research study. There's actually a decent amount of good feedback from them that we're going to kind of work through as a team. So I think the next steps for us will be to triage some of that information coming in. That Epic now has a decent number of, I think there's 1, 2, 3, like eight or nine items on that Epic. They were all feedback from the user interface study. So I think we're probably going to focus on that moving forward. I think we have some things in 13.2 and we want to do some cleanup in 13.2, but 13.3 and onward, we'll probably start prioritizing those user interface updates or just user priorities. So I think that'll probably be next on the list if that helps at all. And I welcome any engineering feedback in any of those because, again, the users knew some about requirements, some knew more than others. So some of them may not make sense for how we're utilizing the product, and we'll just sort of have to work that out. Hopefully that answered that question. Jan had a second question. What would be possible states of requirement? Satisfied, not met, or unknown? What should requirement state be when the user manually marks it as satisfied and then unmarks it? And this is related to an issue we have out there right now that we're trying to implement, which is allowing users to go in and mark a requirement as satisfied. And I think Nick and I talked about this too a little bit. I think the idea is there's really two concepts for requirements. There's, is it satisfied or verified by testing? And is it implemented? And I think where we've gotten a little bit hung up is, I think a user should be able to manually mark a requirement as implemented, but maybe not satisfied. The idea behind satisfied was really, it was tested in some capacity. Now, there is a concept of manual testing, which makes this a little bit interesting. So we kind of have to work through that. I agree that the states, I think we probably want to do another little user research on that or just work through it as a team. But I think satisfied, not met, or unknown are all valid options. And I think we just want to hone down onto what we really want to do there. Satisfied I liked a lot and how we did it because it's not verified, which doesn't use the language that more regulated industries tend to use. I think it's more open that way and more accessible to people. But I think we want to understand when we say satisfied, does that mean that the requirement is implemented and has been tested and is proven to be working? Or does it just mean that the requirement was implemented in the code somewhere? And I think we want to make sure there's that distinction there for the industries that need it and to ease the confusion. So no, this is a great point. This is something we really want to work through. I actually have it on my agenda this afternoon to kind of work through some of these ideas of requirement states because it is getting a little bit confusing as we move forward, and I want to make sure we clarify that as early as possible. So thank you for bringing that up. If there's any feedback on that elsewhere, I may open up an issue or we may continue the discussion on the linked issue, which is the manually mark things as required. It depends how that discussion grows. Let's see. Looks like Martin had a read-only option or a read-only item on there. Is there anything else people would like to discuss? I know we're all having audio issues.
I didn't put it in the agenda yet, I will. I don't know if you've seen this kind of parallel discussion going on about in the project management team about extensible issues. And now we're also at the point where we have iterations. So we're talking about things like the prefixes that we'll use for these. So like, I'll give you an example. When we were doing iterations, we were talking about a multi-character prefix. There's also an open issue around how would we prefix like a branch reference, and we're kind of running out of character space, right, for new prefixes. So I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are. Like, would people ever want to reference requirements from different places? And then have you given any thought to kind of like, as well, we're going to end up with so many things that kind of look like issues, or they're kind of they kind of all cluster in one type if you don't want to think about them as issues. They're definitely not merge requests. They're definitely not vulnerabilities. They're definitely not branches, but they're broadly similar. Like their issues, their epics, their requirements, their iterations, they all sort of act like in similar ways.
I have thought a lot about the need to be able to reference a requirement from within an issue. The idea behind requirements, and this goes sort of back to our previous discussion about the idea of having requirements be marked as implemented and then satisfied. There is the concept where we may want to use within a merge request, this closes or this implements requirement X, Y, or Z. And so when you close the merge request, it would mark those requirements as implemented, which would mean that the code base has been updated to meet that requirement. And then you could then mark them as satisfied down the road when you have run testing against them. So I do think we're going to want a way to reference requirements. I do see the problem we're running into. A lot of special characters are sort of already used, or the ones that make sense are already used. We don't want to do some goofy thing like backslashes or forward slashes, which have other implications as well. So we're kind of limited to the character set we can use. So I think we do want to look into that. I think there's an open issue for that right now, which is being able to reference requirements. I just don't know how we want to handle it necessarily, because I do think we'll want to be able to close it or to implement a requirement via merge request. Just like you can close an issue via merge request, you could then implement a requirement via merge request. And then, way down the road, if you wrote an issue to implement a requirement, any merge request created against that would automatically be tagged as, hey, this implements that requirement. And then from a traceability perspective, when you look at a requirement, you can say, okay, what was used to implement this requirement? And you could see all the merge requests and issues open against it. And you'd be able to see the history of sort of how that requirement had evolved. So I do think there's a necessity for that. I think it's sort of a medium priority. We have an exercise this afternoon, sort of card sorting with Nick, just try to figure out priority, where things are. So if anybody has not been invited to that and wants to be, I think right now it's John, it's the EMs and PMs and UX. John, if you want to broaden that out to invite an engineer too, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, I think it should just be open to anyone who has an interest in this area. Like, one thing that was going through my mind yesterday was just like, if we're running out of character space, why not just use the pound or hash sign for everything? Like I know it's complex on the back end, but from the user's perspective, like they don't really care if they start to type a hash. They want the machine to tell them, to suggest back maybe this requirement, maybe this issue, maybe this iteration. They don't particularly care, or they probably don't want to have to think, right? They know all these things are broadly similar. They don't want to have to think, oh, am I trying to link an epic here? Am I trying to link an issue? Just type and let the machine figure it out.
I completely agree with that. I've thought of that a lot when we started referencing epics and issues, and the fact that they're different. I've oftentimes been sitting there going, wait, was that an epic or an issue? And sometimes we'll promote an issue to an epic, and then you're even more confused because the links kind of need to change. And the ability to type like a pound sign and then start typing a number and have it just suggest relevant things would be fantastic. I don't know how well that functionality works right now. I sometimes get some interesting results when I put in like an issue. When I'm trying to reference an issue, I'll get a lot of not quite related issues, or it'll sit there and spin and it won't give me back older issues. So I think there's probably some technical debt around that we want to look at, but I think that'd be great. And then, from that list, if you typed in like 1973, it would show you everything that was like 1973 from epics, issues, whatever, and they could just select which one they meant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different for iterations and milestones are definitely one type of thing, and then like issues, requirements, even epics maybe might be another kind of thing, but they're definitely different from commits, right? Or like branches or something, right? So like very different from those things. So maybe things that are kind of linked, like cluster in some way together, we could use similar thing. We'd have to really think about the architecture in the back end and how we actually do like some sort of key value store to quickly recommend these things. But and the other thing was, like, I guess if you're talking about linking things from merge requests, a possibility that we would have like a widget similar to issues have, linked requirements or related requirements or blocking requirements. On the other hand, that means adding more widgets to merge requests.
Right.
I don't know.
Problems with that from a merge request perspective. The idea of a merge request being able to implement a requirement is a pretty powerful concept from the requirements perspective, but I don't know if we want to widgetize that. To your exact point, I love the idea, but then we suffer from UX overload, and I think we're kind of up against that line more than we'd like to be in certain areas. I think maybe we should talk to Nick about that as well. Does he have any suggestions? Because this goes back to your idea of having just one symbol for issues, merge or issues, requirements, epics. If you had one widget where you could link things and it would show you all the different things, would that be a better, less cluttered experience for the user where they could just drop down into a menu and they start typing a number and it would give them, related to all sort of in the same clump? Do users really care if they're related to a requirement and an issue, or do they want to distinguish the two? I don't know. That's something we probably want to investigate a little bit more, because I agree it's a powerful idea if done correctly, but it could turn very complex and almost counterintuitive if we're not careful. Excellent. Thank you. That was a good discussion. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Sorry for the audio issues. We'll get to that on our own time here.